What's up, podcasters? I'm one half for the Goldmembers podcast. I go by the name of Herb Reed, Boston's self-proclaimed mayor, aka the HBK.
And it's your boy Tyson, man. Jody, if you know me, Magic, if you met me, man. You know, I'm happy to be here today, man. This is a special one for us.
For sure, and we are the Goldmembers podcast. Make sure you all check us out on all top digital streaming platforms. That's Amazon, Apple, Google, Spotify. We drop episodes every single Thursday, so you all will be able to get this episode next Thursday.
And make sure y'all also check us out on Instagram, man. At Goldmembers Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. We still on there, so make sure y'all check us out on there as well if you got Facebook. So make sure you check us on socials.
For sure, man, and welcome, first of all, to all of you. You know what I mean? Can I get a round of applause from the audience? We do have a live audience here. Told you I was gonna ask for engagement.
And I will go live on y'all. I will.
But this is a special occasion. Of course, this is the Standard of Progress Foundation Luncheon. I don't know how many have happened so far, but it's been a series. It's been good. It's growing. The relationships are cultivating. So one time for that. One time for SOP. Can I get a round of applause for that? For sure. So this isn't just your ordinary luncheon. You know, quite frankly, it's not your ordinary podcast. This is very special, of course, not only with the live audience, but the value of the people that are in the room, the mission and the vision that we all share, not for just ourselves, but those alike, our communities and the people where we come from. So there's a lot of impact, there's a lot of value in this room that's happening right now. And we also have a special guest who also brings a lot of value, a lot of insight, a lot of information and knowledge that we're gonna dig into his story as well. And hopefully we can take away a few gems and be inspired to go out and kind of spread the word and be more engaged ourselves. So for our special guest, we have the founder of Resilient Coders. I'm pretty sure he does a lot more, which we'll dig into some. And he goes by the name of David Del Senties. Can I get a round of applause for him?
Thank you.
Earlier I met him. His name's Big Dave now.
Big Dave, Big Del.
Big Del.
Yeah, he likes to go by Del. So Del, how are you?
I'm good. This is actually probably the first time in my life that I've ever been called big anything.
Big.
See, everything's big. You ever heard of Lotto?
Everybody listening thinks I'm really big.
Yeah, see, your voice. The voice, projecting big.
I like that. Oh, well, Del, it's good to have you here. This is my first time meeting you, but I've heard so many great things about the program that you developed, the opportunities that you're providing. And to be honest, I mean, you've helped provide opportunities for a lot of my friends in the city of Boston as well.
And which is kind of funny because I sat in one of your classes. I ain't say it earlier, but I sat in one of the Resilient Coding classes and I went through the whole process. I just didn't keep going because I had too much on the plate. But I appreciate it, though.
Oh, right on.
I appreciate it.
For sure. So, Del, we're going to dig into your story a little bit. Of course, you're well known from Resilient Coders. As I said, definitely want you to dig a little deeper into that. But to just start off, tell us who David Delmar Senties is. Where did he grow up? What was his upbringing like? What was Del into as a young kid?
Oh man, wow, this is a whole thing. So thank you for pronouncing my name correctly. I appreciate you.
And congratulations on a new baby, too.
Oh, yeah, congratulations. Yes. Absolutely. One time for that. Come on. Put your hands together.
Thank you. I've got a 1-month-old at home at the moment. Anyway, who am I? My backstory. Well, so I grew up in Syracuse, New York. My parents immigrated from Mexico City to Syracuse. I don't get it either, but I grew up in Syracuse. I loved art. Plan A was to be a comic book artist. That was what I wanted to do. I went to art school. I got my degree. It's like, congratulations, here's your art degree. Go make comics, whatever you want. And then I had to pay the rent. And I was unable to pay the rent with my art degree. I slightly, somewhat exaggerated my coding abilities at a job interview. I went to job interviews and they'd be like, all right, cool, so you can design great web applications. Can you actually also build them? This is like the recession, right? So everybody was trying to get the two for the artist and the developer in one. And I was like, no, it says right there on my resume, it says art school. It says art school. And so I just kept getting rejections, and I was absolutely broke. And so at one point I was like, they were like, well, can you code? And I said, yep, absolutely. And the guy whose job I was taking, the guy who I was supposed to be succeeding, he, the person who would be my boss turned to him and was like, well, should we put him up on the whiteboard? And like, don't people do like whiteboarding challenges? And he was like, I'm sure he's fine. And I got the job. Taught myself how to code.
On the job.
On the job. So on the job, I kind of taught myself. Well, I mean, that weekend, that was a very packed weekend for me.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sure.
Imagine.
So,
I'm
yeah,
sure.
so I did a lot of studying over the weekend. Came in knowing a little bit and just kind of learned on the job. And a lot of people took a chance on me, right? So I had this career in tech. I kind of fell in love with the startup communities, tech startup world, and around 2013, 2014, you can't. It was becoming increasingly hard for everybody to ignore the elephant in the room in tech, which is the complete absence of people of color in tech. And I was at one point sent to South by Southwest down in Texas, and I started
The
conducting
music show?
Yeah, the music shit. So the music shit also has. They also have like a tech component, and so I was there for like 4 days, and I was like, first of all, where are the other Latino people? This is Texas,
Right.
and where are the black folks as well in the tech portion of South by Southwest? And they weren't there. They weren't there, and so I came back and I started thinking, I got to do something about this. I don't know what or how, but I got to do something, and so I started taking some volunteer time. I started spending down my vacation days when I was at PayPal at this point, just teaching, just going into, at first I started out with DYS facilities, so youth detention facilities, teaching young men how to code. And I'm loud, I make a lot of noise about stuff that I care about, and I said, look, we have two economies in the city of Boston. We have two economies in the city of Boston before automation really takes a toll on our communities. Right, I live on a street that is absolutely lined with cars with Lyft and Uber stickers on the windshield. What happens to my entire neighborhood when all those jobs go away? Right, automation is bad now. What happens in 10 years when all of that disappears? And people were like, okay, so you might have a point or two, but what are you going to do about it? And so I started this program called Resilient Coders, and it was very different in the early days than what it is now. It was just essentially, we were working, first of all, with younger people. We were working with high schoolers. And I really wanted to bring the ethos of the tech startup environment to this particular realm. And so I wanted to keep us in a constant state of experimentation. So we were always trying something new, trying, failing a little bit more intelligently every time. Then in 2016, we decided to try our hand at a coding bootcamp, which at this point was just starting to gain popularity as a model. And I said, I want to run a coding bootcamp, but I want it to be absolutely free. Because my big concern is that people have equitable access to high growth careers in tech. And when I'm talking about equitable access, I mean education, first of all, must be absolutely free. Not free at the beginning until you pay at the end. Absolutely 100% free if we're going to talk about equitable access to education and thereby equitable access to the workforce. And so in 2016, we created a program that was not just free and stipended, but also not just free, but also stipended. And then we just kept growing the program from there.
So talk to me about a little bit about like what coding can mean to an individual, right? Because we were talking earlier and the conversation around MySpace came up, right?
Yeah, that's
And
MySpace.
if you all remember, right, when you designed your MySpace page, when you put the background on your page and you put the little music player and all those different things on the background of your page, essentially we were coding, right? But it was more of a copy and paste type of thing, right? And we didn't really know what we were doing at that time. So from someone who developed this coding booting camp and then provided jobs and career opportunities from that, could you kind of, in layman terms, explain to us, like, what are the capabilities of coding?
Yeah, coding is anything, any sort of digital interaction that you have, right? So once upon a time, at the beginning of Resilient Coders, we were building websites. But the thing is, the point of Resilient Coders is not just coding, it's the job. So we wanted to keep an eye on where the actual jobs are. What are the actual skills that are getting people jobs? And for a minute, it was websites. And then it was like, well, we got to make actual software. And the difference to me between software and websites is like, look, we all use, let's say we use Spotify, we use Gmail, or we use Netflix or whatever. Those are all things that you might access on the internet, right? They're technically websites, but those are tools. You can interact with them, you can use them, you can build stuff with them. And so that to me makes a difference in the software. And that's really where the money is. And so in terms of what coding is, it's being able to build stuff like this, right? That's sort of like the, if you just ask, like, what is the definition of coding? That's what that is. But to me, what coding is money. Like, all we care about is putting dollars in wallets. We need to make sure that people have access to good, high-paying jobs that allow them to thrive, allow them to rise along with their property values. And so we like to joke that the second that the big industry in Boston is something else, my colleague Leon makes this joke that, like, the second that the big industry in Boston is underwater basket weaving, you can grab your scuba gear, and we're going to be resilient underwater basket weavers, right? Because that's all we care about. Coding is very much secondary. It's a means to an end, and the ends that which we are striving towards is economic parity in the city of Boston.
That's very interesting. Very interesting. You also mentioned something, and for me, this is very informal. I mean, very informative, right? Because again, we got to talk before the show, and I talked a lot about, you know, working in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and creating that engagement, and kind of bridging the gap. You talked a little bit about the tech startup world, and you talked about, as well as, like, there are two different Bostons. And I feel like there's a parallel with that as well. I feel like you have Boston's community, its inner community, which a lot of us come from, but then you have this tech startup world and ecosystem that's happening all around us, right? And then you have certain folks that are within that ecosystem who's trying to bridge that gap, who's trying to create that engagement. Can you talk a little bit about, like, just that tech ecosystem and really Boston's place in it? Because Boston holds a global, like, place in this whole tech startup world.
Yeah, people don't realize that Boston is the Silicon Valley of the East, above and beyond New York by venture dollars, right? So east of California, this is the biggest hub for tech startups by dollars. And so what ends up happening is that you have two different Bostons. I'm sure everybody here is familiar with the famous $8 figure from the Federal Reserve years back. So
black families are worth $8 versus the average white family that's worth about $250,000.
$250,000, exactly. Yeah. And so that to me is a really stark illustration of the economic disparities in Boston. There's no economic bell curve, right? It's an M, right? Wow. And so to me, tech either has the opportunity to exacerbate this crisis or abate the crisis, depending on who is hired and what they're paid. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so if we are able to break down the brick wall between one economy and the other, then we can have folks who are currently at risk of having their jobs automated away to be part of the wave that survives and thrives. We also have a situation whereby tech is exacerbating the crisis of gentrification, right? So since the recession, in the 10 years following the recession, this community, this area added about 240,000 jobs, I believe, right? And about 72,000 housing units. And so the amount of jobs that are being created here are fast outstripping the actual housing units that are available in the same city. And so what ends up happening is that the folks who are coming in from away have more they just have more money, right? They have more opportunity to buy or rent some of the expensive housing units, driving folks who don't have access to those kinds of resources either away from Boston or into multi-generational homes. And so, again, tech has an opportunity to either be the problem or be the solution. And so Resilient Coders is an effort to re-envision tech as a solution to the problem that it is currently exacerbating.
So I kind of wanted to go back a little bit to, did you say you worked at PayPal for a minute?
I did. I worked at a
Was that
startup.
around the time Elon Musk was there?
Never got to meet him.
Never got to meet him, but you might have been in the same building, but you don't know? You're not sure?
Maybe. Now,
Okay.
Now I got to think about that.
Yeah, so I took a liking to what you said about self-teaching. I think self-knowledge is one of the most lucrative things you could possibly do out here with all the knowledge that we have nowadays. It's the information age. So what I was asking, or wanted to know about you was, how was you self-teaching yourself then? Wasn't that like 2008? Like you said, the recession, so that was probably around 2008-ish. How was you able to, you know, self-teach, like teach yourself about coding during that time? Because that wasn't even like a high-risk type of thing that everybody was trying to get into. Like HTML and all that stuff was kind of new to people.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And we had the conversation earlier about us being sent home with computers in the first grade. So we was like already into that world. I'm sure it just was like a brand new world for you to just hop into HTML and all those different type of things like that.
Yeah, so I got a couple books.
Okay.
And then the first thing that I learned was that I don't learn from books.
Okay.
I feel like I made it into my 30s before discovering how I learn. I really wish if I could megaphone one thing out there into the universe is that we should teach kids how they learn.
Yeah.
And so I got these books. I took one look at them and I was like, I'm not going to figure that out at all. And the way I discovered that I learned by building. And so I would just kind of build stuff. I actually built the first thing that I built to learn how to code was this thing that was called See Through the Podium. And it was during the election cycle of 2008. And this was back when facts kind of mattered in politics.
Yeah.
And so, so I had one fact that would be spoken by this candidate, another fact that would be spoken by this other candidate, and there was some sort of like evaluation of like which one is like real. Back when that mattered. And actually that got trolled by Rachel Maddow. Like she got wind of it on MSNBC, and she was like, someone built this website that is frozen in time, because I didn't touch it again.
Oh, so you was going viral before you can go viral.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
But like the wrong way, right?
For the wrong reasons.
Yeah, I built this website, and then I didn't touch. Like I was like, all right, cool, that was a fun learning experience, and I never touched it again.
That's crazy. That's how Facebook kind of got on, by making a website where people didn't like, and then he made a website everybody liked, so everybody went there after.
Yep.
You should have kept going.
I should have kept going.
But I'm with you.
It would have been a different trajectory for me.
Definitely a different. That's crazy.
Yeah, so talk about some of the impact, because this is my first time meeting you, as I said, but I've heard about Resilient Coders. A lot of my friends and individuals that I know have gone through Resilient and have gotten great jobs, might I add. Shout out to my man Ryan.
Word,
He's
I'm
not
about
in the
to say
building
that.
today, but he's usually here, and he is one of the individuals where and might I add, he relocated from Detroit to Boston, went through the Resilient Coders program, got a great job, and now he's still living here in the city of Boston.
And he's actually working on our website
And
with
he's
us.
actually helping us.
Yeah.
How about that? He's actually helping us on our podcast website.
Full circle.
Full circle. Full circle. So can you talk a little bit about the impact? You said you started in 2016. What kind of success stories can you tell? Or what kind of metrics even can you throw out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have become very frustrated with the fact that there are a lot of, even within tech, there almost have emerged two different tracks, right? There are too many programs out there that put kids into jobs or put young people into jobs where they're making $16, $17 an hour. And that's a start. But goddamn, we need more than a start, right? And so I really wanted to aim for the types of jobs that are actually transformative, that people can live on. And so I really wanted to aim for those jobs making $80, $90, $100,000 a year. But I insisted on working with people who didn't necessarily have a background, who didn't have a background in tech, and about 3/4 of each one of our cohorts, people don't even have a bachelor's degree, because I believe bachelor's degrees are part of the gatekeeping mechanism, right, to keep access exclusive, and by exclusive, of course, I mean expensive.
Yeah.
And so what I want to do is I want to take people without a background in tech, most of whom didn't have a bachelor's degree, and be a part of their economic transformation such that they could go from what has in the past been an average of $33,000 a year average to a $98,000 a year average. because I believe that's what it takes to survive and thrive in Boston. Because
Sure.
if we're talking about jobs where you make a little bit more money than you did before, but you still can't afford to live here,
Yeah.
what are we doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, inflation. I saw something interesting the other day where it basically said, like, over the past couple years, if your salary has remained the same over the past couple years with inflation, then essentially you're making less money. And if you've received anywhere between like a 2 to 5 pay increase over the past year or so, then you're essentially making the same money that you did pre-pandemic, right? And so I think what he's saying, and I think we can all attest to the cost of living in Boston. And we have a very diverse crowd. We're pretty much Boston to Springfield here. And I think much of the same thing is it's not only happening in Boston, but it's happening in Springfield. It's happening across the country, right? We're seeing this inflation, this increase in cost of living. Food, I mean, everything, gas, I mean, utilities, water, I mean, you name it. So when you talk about salaries, can you kind of dig into that? Because I think another component, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a component of resilient coders is to also provide that training, those opportunities to folks that have been incarcerated, or those that may have been high risk or have
And
dealt with
minorities
some. So can you talk about that? What's the impact of an individual who may come out of state or federal prison? They come into resilient coders, they complete the program. What kind of impact can that have on an individual like that?
I have so many thoughts on this. So first of all, since we're talking about inflation, I want to take it a step further. Because when you account for inflation, and you also account for things like subsidies, different types of sort of financial, personal sort of aids, the bottom half of American earners haven't seen a wage increase since 1980.
Wow.
Since 1980, when you account for the rise in the cost of living, the rise in rent, housing, all that stuff, bottom half of American earners have not seen a raise since 1980, and that is absolutely wild. By the way, salaries for CEOs of companies have increased 9-fold.
Wow.
9 times. GDP has clipped along at a 16% rate, right? But American earners, like American workers, aren't seeing that money.
Yeah.
In terms of the populations that we work with at Resilient Coders, first of all, everybody that we work with at Resilient Coders is a person of color. We really believe deeply that we are done playing the elaborate Japanese tea ceremony that some agencies do, where we talk about race without talking about race. We work with people of color. Done deal. And a certain proportion of our students are folks who have turbulent pasts. So these are folks who are either at risk, high risk, or what they call proven risk, folks who have been through the system. We like to pretend that we are a beacon of progress out here in Massachusetts, but this is a state that does not recognize the expungement of a criminal record. That is wild.
Let's go ahead and you gotta clap your hands for that. I mean, did you hear what he said? Can you repeat that?
This is not a state that recognizes the expungement of criminal records. We seal it, and it is so frustrating to me when we have students. I had a student recently, or an alum recently, who came to me and said, well, I think my lawyer says that we can seal my record. And people are out there selling the word seal as though it's the same as expungement. And what that means is that they seal the record in such a way that employers can see that you have a record, but they don't know what's in it.
Right.
And what that means is that if you stole a Snickers bar from a convenience store when you were 18, right, you have a record.
Right.
And the employer is going to see that you have a record, and they can't see what's in it if it's sealed. But we need to actually work on complete expungement. So one of the challenges that we have had with students who have come to us with turbulent pasts is that we have to work exclusively with employers who are open to the fact that they have a record. And thankfully that's increasing. There are more and more employers who are open to it. But that's got to change immediately.
Yeah, for sure.
So we were talking about the completion of the program, you know what I mean? And how it's kind of like hard for people to like actually finish. And we talked about laborers and we talked about resilient coders in the same field. I was wondering, like, what's the hardest thing about what you do? Like, what's the hardest thing about your job right now?
About what I do or what the students do?
About what you do?
There's a lot. So, all right. I think probably the hardest thing about what I've done in my position at Resilient Coders is get employers on board with who we're talking about in terms of talent.
Okay.
I think that employers have been subjected to decades of diminished expectations.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain degree of paternalistic racism out here in Boston where people are like, yeah, we'll give them a chance.
Yeah.
We'll give them a chance. You can sit over there at that job that's not going anywhere and make $15 an hour forever until the job disappears. Fine.
Mm-hmm.
And we have been fighting that fight all along because that's what employers have been made accustomed to. And when we come in and say, because they come to us and say, hey, maybe they can, I'm like, all right, well, we need the job to be full-time. And they're like, full-time? But they don't even have a degree. And I'm like, I don't care. It's got to be full-time. So then they come in and say, okay, well, we can offer you this job at $55,000 a year. And I'm like, market rate is 98. And so we're always sort of digging and digging and digging. And thankfully, we have a ton of employers now in Boston. We've been around forever. People know, people are aware of the talent coming out of Resilient Coders, and so they've been able to nudge up. But that has been something that we work with quite a bit, is making employers understand that we're not talking about freebies. We're not talking about like, we'll give this person a chance. We're talking about a skilled worker doing a job that is worth $95,000 a year, being paid $95,000 a year, regardless of the pedigree on his resume.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Like we know a lot of entrepreneurs don't have college degrees or
Exactly.
even a high school diploma, so that really should go out the window when it comes to certain
Out the
things.
window.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I definitely see that as a barrier. We also talk, and I know we're kind of jumping around. We're really shooting questions. Great job at answering everything that we're throwing at you right now. But you know, you mentioned employers, and it's just, you know, part of the theme. And I'm really talking to the audience with this, but part of the theme is strength in numbers, right? And so there's a lot of value that comes in all of us being in a room like this, right? And I think like where we're headed with this conversation and like with the underlining message is that there's a whole ecosystem, there's a whole world of economic opportunity that's happening right here around us. I mean, you heard from Del that we're in Boston, which is one of the economic hubs for this tech startup world that's happening. And so there's a lot of opportunity around here. And so, you know, you'll find those anecdotal black or brown individuals that's in the tech world, you know, who's like representing the community, who's pushing their career forward. But there's really a need for like black and brown people to have a presence and to occupy this space in large numbers. Like we talked about prior to the show, we talked about, you know, the decarbonation of this world, right? Right now, the world is going through a clean energy transition, right? Where everything is being transformed from oil and gas to renewable and clean energy, right? And in order, when you look at the infrastructure of this world, of this country, I mean, we have skyscrapers, you know what I mean? Everything from skyscrapers down to your one little apartment and townhouse ultimately has to be totally converted, again, from oil and gas to renewable and clean energy. So that's everything from how you receive hot water to your appliances, to your utilities, your electrical bill, who you're paying, and the service that you're paying for. And so for us to get to this zero gas emissions goal that the entire world has, right? It's going to take a large presence of black and brown people in this industry to have the skill, the coding, the software engineering skill to be able to provide that manpower and that labor. Again, we're talking about the total conversion of everything, of this building, of the building across the street. If they're not already operating on smart technology, they're saying that they're building buildings that are like Teslas, right? So skyscrapers are the new Teslas. They're operating off of that same coding, software engineering, clean energy, renewable energy systems, right? And so I think that's kind of like and I think that's what's so impactful about what Dell has done is that he's contributing to that workforce, right? You see everybody, I've worked in diversity, equity, and inclusion for the past 8 years. And everybody from the biggest corporates to the local trade unions, they're all in a mad scramble to find black and brown people that they can train and upskill so that they can take on these jobs that's a part of this whole clean energy transition. And so I think that's part of like the underlining tone. I don't know if you really have any thoughts, but can you talk about the importance? It's not just so we're not encouraging black and brown people to go into the tech fields or to take on these new skill sets just so we can all lock arms and show unity amongst races, right? But can you really talk about the importance of having black and brown people that's a part of the advancement of our country, that's part of the advancement of technology and this whole transition that we're now going through? Can you talk about that importance?
I'm saying also what it can do with the economical scale for the middle class and the minority as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think resilient coders, or the aspirations of resilient coders, are beyond putting a few people into jobs. It's about the absolute overhaul of tech culture, fundamentally. And we used to tell our alumni that resilient coders is it's a Trojan horse, right? It's a Trojan horse in that it is an elaborate piece of decoration without considering the sacking of Troy, right? Without the recalibration of power dynamics, without there having an overhaul of the culture, all it is a few folks who have jobs who did not have jobs earlier, which is good, but it's not enough. That's not where my heart's at. I think that there is a much bigger picture here. I think the way to do that is to have some folks in those jobs and be a part of the change in culture so that it becomes less of an anti-systemic. Right now we're cutting against the grain, right? Resilient code is fundamentally anti-systemic in that we work against the system so that some folks can have access to opportunities. But at a certain point, right, you start to wonder, as you're grabbing people by the ankles and flinging them over the walls into these spaces, you start to become frustrated at the persistence of the wall. You start to become frustrated at the fact that you are always going upstream. And what's up with the stream? Like, at what point are we going to talk about the fact that this is anti-systemic, that we're trying to run over the barricades? When will it just become normal? When can resilient coders become obsolete? When can we shut down resilient coders? When can our alumni's kids or grandkids say to our alumni, why would you ever need a coding bootcamp for people of color, right? My biggest aspiration for resilient coders was that it shut down.
Okay, you gotta go deeper into that for me.
Resilient coders is an aberration, right? It's duct tape. It's not. A lot of people early on used to celebrate the fact that we were sort of like quote unquote fixing the system.
Are you saying it's a Band-Aid on a bullet wound?
Right, exactly. It's a Band-Aid on a bullet. And people are like, well, it's a fix in the system because some people are like, slipping through the cracks. But the fact of the matter is that it's not fixing the system. The system is working perfectly fine, right? This is a proposal to completely overhaul the system. This is a statement that expensive college should not be necessary to get that kind of job. You fundamentally do not need to spend $160,000 to get a coding job. And the fact that you do right now is because of the fact that we have a gatekeeping mechanism that collects money, right? Opportunity is a resource, like gold, like oil. And if you can keep it scarce and stand there at the opening and own that opening, then you can make some good money. So as long as opportunity is restricted to a select few, other people are going to make money. And so fundamentally what we are proposing is a completely different system whereby we step around the gate. There's no need for there to be a gate. Access to good jobs should be predicated on your talent, your will, your drive, and not on how much money you or your parents were able to spend on a certain expensive degree so that you can look good to recruiters in the future. So it's not that we want to fix what's currently going. It's not that we co-sign on everything else about accessing the workforce right now, but rather presenting an alternate model and saying, see this over here, it is possible to do it a different way. And every single time we get an alum into a job where they are paid what they are worth to do their craft, that is one more feather in our cap. That's one more point in which we say, see, that was not necessary the way we do it currently. There's a whole other way to run a workforce.
I think that might have been
I gotta, are y'all not feeling this? Because I'm feeling this. It's hitting me right here. I don't know where it's hitting y'all at. Maybe it's hitting some of y'all up here. So you're not expressing it the way I am. But I hope this is reaching, people, because, I just can't stress that enough. And I'm a people person. You know what I mean? I'm all about spreading information, spreading resources, you know what I mean? And just really connecting the dots. So I don't know. I don't know if you all are like feeling like I need to go tell someone about what's happening. You know what I mean? When we leave here. Because we have a good sized crowd. But if everyone went out of here and told one person and engaged another person, strength in numbers. Look at the card that's right in front of you. You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of, give me a thumbs up, Rock, if you're looking for folks to be inspired to then go tell another individual and engage somebody else and maybe get them in the room at the next SOP Foundation luncheon. That's what I'm getting. I don't know. I'm just, what do I know? I'm just a podcaster. But go ahead, bro. You have a question?
Nah, I was gonna say, so we obviously know that all things come to an end at some point, right? And as we was talking to you earlier, you're still trying to find a successor.
Yeah.
So what are you looking for, a certain person to take your place?
Well, tell us about that, because before you get there, you talked about how you've had this impact, right? You have these cohorts of individuals who are going through training, they're getting job placement. And what I sense from you is that you want to have a bigger impact. And so you talked about attacking the issue systemically.
Yep.
Can you kind of tie that into your answer a little bit?
Yeah, so Resilient Coders was ultimately meant to, it's meant as an effort to, like I said earlier, recalibrate power dynamics in our economy, right? And it's done its thing. Resilient Coders is phenomenal, and it will go on without me. But as I was starting Resilient Coders back in 2014, I decided that I wanted to be at Resilient Coders until I was no longer needed, and then move on. And that's this year. That's happening this year. It occurred to me this year that the organization is thriving. It's doing well. It needs me less and less. What we need now at Resilient Coders is less somebody who is a starter, like I am. It needs somebody who can build the systems and operations necessary for the organization to continue scaling. We've scaled some. We're currently in Boston and Philly. But we need to scale further. I want us to scale further. And that's not really me. It's not what I'm good at. And it's not what I want to do. And the other thing is that I've also become frustrated, like you might have heard earlier, with the persistence of the wall. Here's the thing. I feel like we all know that it's not about the skills, right? We have a bifurcated economy, and I think skills are a big part of it. I think you need to have the skills in order to get the job. But the fact of the matter is, when a white man with only a high school degree can make more money than a black man with a bachelor's degree, which is the case in this country, then we have to face a cold, hard fact, which is that at the end of the day, it's not just about the skills. Because if it were about the skills, the more education you were able to attain, the more you'd be paid, regardless of your skin color. And that's not the case in America. And so it is not about the skills. And we have an entire industry of workforce development professionals that what we do is upskill. We do skills training. But here's the thing. We go to work every day at Resilient Coders understanding that nothing we do that day will be enough. We are manifestly unworthy of the people that we serve, and we cannot make the economic change by ourselves that they deserve. Imagine going to work every day being like, nothing I do today will be enough, right? And so there's got to be a different change beyond Resilient Coders, beyond this entire field of upskilling, because you can't upskill this problem away. And so I gotten tired. I gotten sick and tired. we have to think bigger and more systemically about the obstacles that preclude non-white people from enjoying the success in tech that is commensurate with their skills. And we need to do that in coalition. And so whatever I do next as my time at Resilient Coders winds down, this is where my focus will be. It will be in building a coalition of individuals who care deeply about transforming tech in such a way that people can be paid for their craft according to their skill and their willpower, rather than their pedigree or their race, which is just not the reality that we live in, at least in Boston at the moment.
Okay. So another thing I was going to say about that is, I know you just said that it's really important for people of color to get inside of, well, to get those opportunities and things like that. And I know that you said that you're on your way out the door. Do you think that you'll be able to find someone to keep that same energy that you have, that same passion that you have for getting people inside this program and teaching them those values of the company and what y'all really trying to stand for the near future? Or
yeah, I was talking to Oraka earlier, and one of the things that I was mentioning is that one of the things that I'm very proud of about Resilient Coders is that now we have hundreds of people. We have a whole group of alumni, who's literally hundreds of people, who understand what Resilient Coders is supposed to be. Are we that every day? No, of course not. But even when we fall flat of being who we want to be, everybody understands who we're supposed to be. And so I do believe that there is somebody out there, or in there, either externally or internally, who understands what Resilient Coders is supposed to be and can come in and take the reins and push that forward.
And this is probably one of my last questions right here. So I remember you saying, like, I'm not sure, you want to write a book, right? Or you're in the process?
I did write a book.
You did write a book?
Yeah.
Okay, can you give us some more knowledge about the book that you wrote and what it possibly can do for me, or where we can find it or anything of those?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not technically supposed to start promoting yet, but I can't stop you from Googling my name and the title, What We Build With Power.
Okay. Okay.
In fact, if you were to accidentally type in your phone bit.ly/what we build with power, all one word, all lowercase, you can go to the Penguin Random House page. The Penguin Random House page is not, I'm not supposed to be promoting it yet because it's not up on Amazon yet. Mm-hmm. But so I have this book coming out in March. You can pre-order now. And it's basically this. It's a lot of history, because I think people don't really understand the history of how we got here. Like the workforce has been bifurcated for a very long time, right? And there are definitely different nodes along the history of work in America that are worth exploring in order to understand where we're at now. And then there's a bit of an exploration of why DE&I hasn't worked in tech yet. And some pathways as to what we can do to push that forward. I believe a lot of this is going to rest on worker organizing, especially worker organizing among Black and Latino people in tech, I believe. I don't believe change is going to come from the C-suite. I don't believe change is going to come from government at the moment. Cavalry's not coming. The cavalry's not coming. And so I believe that a fundamental shift will have to happen in tech culture among techies. And so that's largely what the book is about.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. You mentioned something, and this may be a little off topic, but I feel like it's a good piece of information. Just by a show of hands, how many people in here are an entrepreneur, have a business of their own, or would like to have a business of their own? Raise your hands. Raise your hands. Anybody? Okay. All right. That's pretty much the majority of the audience, right? And you mentioned something. You've taken Resilient Coders from an idea and a concept to proven success, and now you've scaled across 2 major cities, Boston and Philadelphia. I think it's fair to say that everyone here who has an entrepreneurial spirit would love to get to a point where they've developed their company and now they're growing, scaling, and expanding across multiple cities, right? Am I on point when I say that? Right? Most folks would want to grow their business and have a business in multiple cities, right? Okay. So can you talk about some of the foundational or some of the fundamental things that go into growing, developing, and scaling an organization or a company?
Yeah. Assume that you're doing it wrong. That's something that has been sort of like a through line of my own experience. As long as I've been able to assume that I'm doing it wrong and there's somebody out there who's doing it better, it has allowed me a little bit of, it's allowed me to fail, right? Over and over and over again, understanding that I'm failing with a purpose, failing intentionally, a little bit more intelligently every time. It's also allowed me the humility to listen, to understand that the person that I'm talking to might actually have a better sense of what's going on, a better sense of how to do something than I have myself. And also having the humility to share power and vision with other people who are around you. That's something that has been incredibly important for the story of Resilient Coders.
That's really tough. You know, a lot of people have problems sharing power. Mm-hmm. I experience that a lot.
Yep.
Like when folks have, you know, autonomy over like their company, their organization, their role. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with some of the folks who may feel like you're taking some of their power or you're taking some of their wealth and you're distributing it to communities and demographics that are outside of their own? How do you deal with the people who have trouble sharing power?
I don't. I just don't. I don't deal with them. You know what I mean? Like I feel like people who are holding on to power are going to lose it, because that's not the way that power, at least in my experience, in my small little realm, the people who insist on holding power themselves are not going to hold power very long. They're not going to keep that job very long. Their business isn't going to grow very far. They're not going to attract the types of people that you need to surround yourself with in order to grow your business. The best talent that's out there wants to have a bit of power, wants to have a bit of say. And if you're not somebody who is willing to share it, to share not just power, but vision, which to me is the bigger sacrifice.
Yeah.
If you're not willing to share vision, you're not going to attract those people. You're going to attract the people who want a job.
Yeah.
And that's just a different type of individual.
Yeah. Can you talk about some of the economic opportunity? Can you throw out some dollar figures around the size of investments that startups are getting, the amount of money that goes into software engineering? Can you kind of paint a picture of the economic opportunity and the money that's available in this tech realm?
And my question kind of ties into that. Can you, because I know a part of wealth nowadays is creating residual income. Mm-hmm. Is there a way that you can create residual income in the tech field?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of money that's out there, I haven't checked since inflation. And so I'm sure that the types of jobs that are out there now, I'm sure you can get whatever, anywhere between $150,000 to $300,000 jobs pretty early to mid-career as a software engineer.
Jesus.
In Boston.
Put my hands together. God damn. Y'all don't seem impressed. I mean, 150,000. Raise your hand if you're making anywhere close to that today. 150,000, 300,000, 200,000, 250,000, going once, going twice. I mean, y'all don't seem impressed. God damn.
And residual income, I feel like I've heard different like ways in which you can do it. Obviously, just either investing in companies directly, or just investing in whatever way makes sense for you. But I don't really feel sufficiently qualified to speak on how to do that. I certainly haven't figured it out for myself.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, we talked about a lot.
We did.
There was a lot of good information in that. I hope you all caught it. We're not ending just yet. Though, is there anything that you wished we would have asked? Are there any topics or any information that you would like to share? Again, you kind of, in a sense, you have a room full of evangelists. You have a room full of folks that's going to leave this luncheon and they're going to tell everybody about the great opportunities, not only at Resilient Coders, but in this tech realm right here in the city of Boston. Is there any information that you feel like this crowd should know as they go out and they tell everyone in their communities from Boston to Springfield about this whole discussion that we're having?
Honestly, normalize on-the-job training in tech. It sounds like such a specific and maybe kind of like boring thing. But if people had a chance to start a job with a limited background, if you were able to hire somebody based on their potential rather than what they've already done in the past, then you might have somebody with hockey stick growth.
I was about to say, that's what they do in sports. They
Right,
draft
exactly.
people off their potential, and they might be a bust later, but you can find that out. It's really in the hard work that they put in.
Exactly. So in tech, we like to pretend that we do that. So there are a lot of people, I've talked to a lot of employers who say things like, oh yeah, we absolutely hire for potential, which is why we give a coding challenge at the beginning to make sure that they have experience in the particular programming language and blah, 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 blah. Like, that's not what I mean. I mean, if you are able to find somebody who, through some other means that does not require a coding challenge, you're able to understand that this individual has some serious potential and some grit and ambition, and you just give them an opportunity to learn the specific skills on the job. I mean, programming languages are just tools. Right? People can learn tools with a little bit of time and some caffeine, right? If you're able to give somebody some of that, then you might have somebody with hockey stick growth who is going to be a way bigger contributor in, say, a year than somebody whose growth trajectory looks very different but has been coding for forever.
Yeah, for sure. So we want to thank Del. Can I get a round of applause?
And Del got the ring on too, so we're gonna thank his wife for letting him come out and leave the baby.
Yes, with the 1-month-old. Come on, you gotta appreciate his time. He has a 1-month-old. He pretty much risked it all for us. So like, we have to show our appreciation. But thank you for coming and sharing your insight with us and sharing your story. Best of luck to you in the future, on your future endeavors. Brazilian Coders has had enormous impact. As I said, it's my first time meeting you, but if I had to reflect on the impact that you've had, you've impacted me even indirectly, even though I haven't gone through the program. To see my friends go through it and to see them prosper and to see them relocate from the Midwest part of this country and come here to Boston and sustain a living, I mean, that's the impact. You know what I mean? So
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
yeah, for sure. I mean, and it's genuine. And so we want to open up the floor. If there are audience members out there who have a question or two, why we still have Del here? He has a 1-month-old he has to get back to. So if you have questions, we want to open up the mic for a short Q&A session. Come up, ask your question. Now is the time to do so. Don't be shy. Come on, let's get it. Let's do it. I feel it. Somebody wants Scott? Okay, we got one, yes. Let's go. Yeah. Sit down, yes. Let's go.
I appreciate being here and appreciating the space and everything you're all doing. I had a quick question for you. So what are some of the common anxieties and growth edges that you hear from students who are considering entering the program? And what is some support and resources that you would provide or impart on them?
That's a good question, and it's one that I have kind of an uncomfortable answer to, which is the fact that the program is super hard, and we have struggled over the years to provide adequate support. And so in terms of anxieties that people have going into the program, we all do. Like, there's nothing that I've been able to figure out that we can say or do to calm those anxieties other than give people a chance to prove to themselves that they can do it. If I could wave a magic wand, I would decrease the level of anxiety that our students experience when they're going through the program. And we have toyed with making the program easier. And then we had a whole group of alumni come back and say, no, because the job's hard. The job is hard. And so keep the program hard so that we can go right from the program to the job. Because what we don't want to do is create a program that is easier and then have them go to a job that is very hard and anxiety producing and have them experience those anxieties and learn to deal with them on the job.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great answer. Sure. We have another question? We got KJ coming up. Okay, here he come. I'm gonna drop a bomb on this question. Let's go.
Nah, no need.
Let's go.
Not at all.
Let's go.
Not at all. I just wanted to ask you, what you said you're going to be leaving the company. What are your plans going forward? What are you going to be doing next?
I don't really know. So I'm trying to give myself a little bit of space to just be a dad at the moment. After that, what I do know is, first of all, I got to promote this book that I'm not allowed to promote yet, but if you go to bit.ly/what we build with power,
Yes.
I can't stop you. And after that, I know what I want to do is I want to be a part of some sort of cultural and systemic change in tech. But I don't yet exactly know what that looks like. I'm having a whole bunch of conversations, pulling together some allies that could represent a coalition. But I don't really know much yet.
Got you. Another question about that. As far as the, I know you said you didn't know specifically who's going to be successing you at your company, but do you know if a lot of the things that define your program are going to be specific to you, or are they going to stay going forward?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I've been trying my best to spend, I've spent the last year sort of like Homer Simpsoning into the hedges, making Resilient Coders less and less and less about me. There was a time and a place when Resilient Coders was me and I was Resilient Coders. And I've been spending the last year, but I basically decided to leave this company at the end of last year. And I gave myself a year to sort of like slip away and give my amazing, incredible team more leeway to do more, and so that I could do less and be less and less visible, I guess, as the head of Resilient Coders.
Gotcha. I guess I got a bunch of questions. Did you I know you talked about the importance of minorities establishing footing in the tech space and things of that nature. Did you find any? That's a tough question. Did you find any difficulty for yourself being a representative for that, being white presenting, while you are technically a minority?
It's weird because I think that I have really often reflected on who employers see when they talk to me. Because you're right, I am white. I'm Latino and white, right? There are a lot of white Latinos. And so I have often found myself wondering whether a black person in my position, or if I'd been black, if I'd had the same success with employers, if they'd seen somebody different. Because I've lived the life of a white person, right? Whenever I've walked into any sort of conversation, unless I explicitly say so, people wouldn't necessarily guess that I'm Latino. And so that's a tough question I don't have an answer to. All I can do is assume based on experiences that I hear from my colleagues and our alumni that my path to success at Resilient Coders might have been more difficult, at least with our white dominant employers, had I been non-white.
Gotcha. Appreciate you. Thank
you. Well, thank you.
I have a question. Can you talk about that? Because again, we got a lot of entrepreneurs in the building. We got a lot of folks with the entrepreneurial spirit in the building, right? Don't we? Can I get some amen? What? Come on. And so, talk about that, because how does a founder step down from their own company? Am I the only person wondering that? You know what I mean? Can you dig into that a little bit? And you also mentioned to us that you will still be hands-on because you will be joining the board of Resilient Coders. But how many of you can imagine building a business as the founder and then stepping down from it? You all can all imagine that? Okay, so can you provide some insight around just how that transition happens? Again, sharing power.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, it's not just about sharing power, it's about sharing vision, which is crucial. Because if somebody were to come in and take Resilient Coders, or take the reins at Resilient Coders, who didn't share our vision, that would be really sad. If somebody were just like, hey, we're an educational institution, we're gonna operate like an educational institution, we're gonna charge money, we're gonna do this, that, and the other thing, that would be tragic for me. But if somebody were to come in and say, we need to change culture in tech, or we need to change the economic realities of the city of Boston, or we need to provide equitable access to high growth careers, and I don't care if we do it through coding or through underwater basket weaving, I'd be like, absolutely. I think the comfort that I feel in stepping away is one of the things that I'm most proud of achieving at Resilient Coders, which is to say as Arak and I were talking about this earlier, I feel like I could pull aside any one of our hundreds of alumni, and they understand damn well what Resilient Coders is supposed to be. And so I feel like it's in good hands because people understand what the vision is, what the aspiration is. I actually care more about whether or not the next leader understands the vision and aspiration than whether or not they keep it programmatically the same.
Right.
You know? And so I think that that's what has been most important to me since founding the organization is producing or having some role in the development of a community that can outlast me.
It's powerful. We have another question.
Yeah, man. My name is Noble, creator of Museum TV. I have a vlog out here in Boston. I love how humble you are, first and foremost, bro, for real. And my question was, how important would you say it was for you to, think of the individual before the brand? Because I feel like a lot of times people forget that they're an individual and not, what they're running. And I feel like that's very important for your personal growth, which then will kind of, trickle down into the growth of the brand of the company in itself. So can you think of times where, you might have had a situation with somebody that you're working with, and it was a situation where it was either your way or what they might have been thinking, and, you kind of made a decision to kind of go towards the group versus, what you wanted to do, and how that might have, helped you versus, you kind of asserting yourself. You see what I'm saying? So in hindsight, those situations where it's like, all right, I could have asserted myself, but actually asserting myself would have hurt the situation more. So if you have any, situations like that.
Absolutely. I have situations kind of both ways. First of all, thank you for your question, and thank you for the kind words.
Of course.
Oh man, I feel like how much time do we have? Like I have experienced this a bunch of times, and ironically, I've kind of experienced both. Like I've experienced situations where it was very clear that I needed to take a step back and share power or share decision making, and I've also experienced situations where I did take a step back and did share power, and it went poorly. One of the balances that I have had to learn to strike, and I actually don't think that I've ever done it particularly well, is understand when to share power and when to be a little authoritarian, frankly. My nature is to share, right? My nature is to be like, yeah, this is a communal thing, let's all do this together. And that hasn't always worked out for Resilient Coders. I had a colleague who said to me, once I announced that I was leaving, he said to me, if there's one thing I can say is I think that you've always had a vision for what this organization is supposed to be, and I wish you fought for it more. And it really stuck with me because I thought, we were sharing power and sharing vision, all this other thing. But he was like, no, I think that we would have done better to just be what your vision of Resilient Coders was.
Do you feel like generous people, for the most part, have a problem being disciplined?
That's a really big question. I think it depends on what you mean by discipline. I
feel like a lot of times generous people, all they know is to give. Sometimes they don't know when to, sustain and kind of, you see what I'm saying?
Then 100% yes. I feel like there are a lot of generous people out there who take a hit intellectually, financially, and emotionally. And I wish that it were easier to understand about oneself and about society. Where is the line for generous people? Like, at what point do you need to say, look, I love you and I want to give you everything that I have, but I need to hold on to something for me because I'm a little bit struggling. And that's also, in my experience, generous people who don't necessarily let on that they're struggling because they don't want to take up all that space. And so I also wish that we could normalize for generous people, for folks who live for others or who want to live for others, normalize the ability to say, look, you matter so much to me that I want to show up for you and as my best self in the best way that I can. And for me to do that, I need to focus on myself right now. And I say this, by the way, from having been very bad at this over and over again.
I'm only asking because I deal with, teams and things like that. So it's amazing to hear somebody else who has a similar nature, succeeding as well, you know what I'm saying? And just hearing the similarities, So respect once again, bro. You know what I mean? Thank you.
Thank you.
For sure. Those are great questions. Great questions. We got another question coming up. I'm loving the engagement. Let's go.
Yes, I'm Chad. I just wanted to ask a quick question based on the fact that, I'm an educator that's looking to kind of switch fields into the tech field. And I'm currently living in the Bronx, New York, and I just found out about your program fairly recently from Oraka, a good friend of mine. And I'm interested to learn more about resilient coders and how I could be somewhat of a beacon for the program in the Bronx, New York area. What are some things that I could do?
Well, thank you. So in terms of learning about more about resilient coders, first of all, we can certainly talk. I'm sure Oraka would be happy to connect us. There's also, of course, the website. But I unfortunately don't know as much about other opportunities like resilient coders that exist in New York as I wish I did. I'm a big believer in staying local. In fact, I have all kinds of conflicted feelings about our expansion outside of Boston. But I would the first thing that I would do is I would look into what is out there in New York that is like resilient coders.
I have been looking. I haven't really found anything
Really?
that's very similar, but I definitely keep looking. I just wanted to let you know that, the work that you do is very transformative and important.
That's kind of you to say. Thank you.
That, we appreciate all the work that you do.
Thank you.
Another question. I'm loving it. Thank you.
Debating. Hi, Sandra. I work for BPS, and I was listening in on a lot of the things that you were mentioning about having equitable access for all kids, minorities, black and brown. The expansion part, when you do step down, have you ever thought about having your alumni come into schools and kind of building off of that to give younger children an opportunity for coding?
Yes, I love doing that. We've had first of all, thank you for your question. We have had a few opportunities for alumni to essentially broaden awareness of not just resilient coders, but of coding as an opportunity. And it's not really something that we on staff don't really put a lot of time, effort, and energy into it. But we absolutely love when alumni take it upon themselves to do that. Because that takes resilient coders from being an organization or a business to being really a community. And so when our alumni take it upon themselves to go, Ryan does that. I know Ryan's not here, but
Yeah.
Ryan's gone into
Yeah.
schools in
Yep.
the past, and he's done exactly that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And the young lady there, we have educators in the room. That was perfect that she came up and asked this question. Again, man, I guess I'm so, though you have to excuse me, I guess I'm so, passionate. It really put a lot of emphasis on, who's in the room and, the message that we take and we spread to others because, a lot of it is in my work, personally and professionally. But again, we need the presence, the brother there from the Bronx, New York. He wants to get involved and then spread the resource to individuals. This is serious, and I don't want to undermine it or undervalue it, given the setting that we're in and we're all here and enjoying ourselves. But
And
it's extremely
I
important.
also think that it's important with her question is with the kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying though. Her as an educator in this room, I didn't know that, and I wouldn't have known she was an educator unless we had a conversation, and unless she came up to the microphone and posed her question. But that's what I mean about evangelist. That's why I use that term, because she has an entire student body that she can then go share this information with. Going into college, again, we had such a great conversation. I part of me wishes that part of our conversation that we had earlier was during the actual recording. But we talked about, going out and spreading the word and incorporating more black and brown people and creating those opportunities for individuals. And again, just to bring it full circle, I think that's what Oraka and the rest of the team that developed these luncheons are trying to develop. We're trying to spread the resource. We're trying to create value within the network. Her coming up and saying she's an educator, like, be prepared for me to have a conversation with you after we stop this production, because she's tapping into an entire network of youth, of students, of future generational professionals that are actually going to have an impact in this world. You know, and again, I'm only emphasizing that to just express the value in the conversation that we're having. It's not the largest crowd. We don't have hundreds of people here, but everybody, if they go back and they tap into their own individual network, the impact that we can have is across multiple cities. Again, Boston to Springfield, Boston to the Bronx, and then whoever else is in here. We also have another educator back there from Charlestown High School that I personally know. And so we're doing it by sparking and interacting with two individuals who are educators that we've identified in the room. We could possibly impact hundreds. And so again, I'm only saying that to just talk about the value in the conversation that we're having. So there's no punchline or anything, but I just want to emphasize that.
Lastly, I just want to say thank you, man. I actually sat in an aviation course with a bunch of kids, and I just noticed the power of hands-on learning and just being in that system and working right then and there, like you said, working on the job or self-teaching yourself, self-knowledge. So I was in an aviation course with a bunch of kids, and just by them flying the little planes, it starts at 12 years old. You can start the program at the age of 12 and go all the way until you're actually able to fly a real plane and bring people around the world.
I was going to say, I don't know about being in a plane with a 12-year-old pilot.
Oh, hey, but there's 17 and 16-year-old ones, 16, 17-year-old ones. But that's what I'm saying, though. Like, they're teaching them from that point forward. They're trying to get to the youth now. And then later on, they're already equipped